everybody, if you guys keep up with the new stuff that comes out on e.l.f.'s website, you know that there are a ton of new palettes out. In fact, there are 3 new face palettes and 4 new eyeshadow palettes. And I went ahead and placed an order lickety-split on that stuff so I could test it out and pass along my reviews to you. Since I've just gotten so many questions about all of them, I thought I would just put together my reviews into one video, show you demos, swatches, the whole 9 yards. So if you're wondering about any of these, you can get all the info here. The 3 face palettes are a foundation, a bronzer, and a contouring palette, and these are in the same style as the blush palettes that came out like about a year or so ago. They've got the little pans that can pop out, so if you wanted to, you know, buy up a bunch of these, switch out the shades, you could do something like that. And then the eyeshadow palettes are in more of a long, skinny style. This is the Everyday Smoky one, for example. They each contain 10 different shades, so I will show you a little demo using a couple of different ones in this video and swatches of all of them today. So starting in with the face palettes, there's only one of them that comes in multiple shade options, and that is the foundation palette. So I have this in light-medium. You can refer to e.l.f.'s website to kind of browse what else is available where that's concerned. Again, the pans pop out from the back. You just apply some pressure, like with your thumb on the back side of the palette. You can pry the product out very easily and switch them around if you wanted to. Another thing about these, there is a really good sized mirror here. So if you were holding this in front of your face, I mean, you can really get your whole face in there to see and do your makeup if you wanted to use it that way. I don't really have any complaints in terms of how well these worked to match my skin tone, because I thought I was able to use the lighter ones in places where I wanted to be slightly lighter, the deeper colors everywhere else, but don't expect to have so much contrast in one of these to where like you're going to be doing cream highlighting and cream contouring, because I mean, at least for my skin tone, there's not enough drastic contrast between the colors to do something like that. But in terms of the texture, the consistency, they're very thin to the touch, and they almost have a little bit of a greasy feel to them. And that's something that I kind of remember feeling in the HD Mattifying Cream Foundation. I'm pretty sure that these are the same kind of formula. I mean, I can't say for sure that they're the exact same, but if you've tried this, the HD Mattifying Cream Foundation, you'll have an idea of what to expect with this palette. It's that thin, lightweight kind of cream formula. As I put it on the skin, I used my Sigma F84 brush and just dabbed into the different ones, starting with the lighter ones like under my eyes and, you know, just the high points of my face, and then really buffed in the slightly deeper shades elsewhere on my face. And the coverage is definitely, I think, a straight up medium coverage. Even when I do try to build these up a bit more, I still don't think they get to a full coverage place for me. And I have tried this with a sponge as well. That's a decent way to apply them. You could also swipe in these with your fingers if you wanted to, but regardless of the method, I feel like I'm not really exceeding medium coverage with this. I'm able to even out general skin tone problems, but if you needed to conceal things with a regular concealer, you're probably still going to need to do that. Sunspots, freckles, I can still see that kind of thing through this, blemishes too. But really the deal breaker for me on this palette was the staying power. I feel like I have to set the crap out of this with powder to actually get some decent staying power as the day goes on. Because if I just lightly set it like I have the first few times I've used this, I feel like the product practically disappears. Like I get a close look at my face and it's not like it was huge coverage to begin with, but the staying power is just not there for me. And I don't have especially oily skin. I've got really pretty normal skin right now. Maybe a little oily in the T-zone, but the areas I was even honing in on to see it staying power wise were like right here on my cheek, you know, and I didn't feel like I was seeing any more product. But today I added in on top of this some concealer on the under eye area, and anywhere else I needed it, I used my MAC Pro Longwear, and then I used my Milani Multitasker powder on top of that. So for me, this is just kind of nothing I would repurchase. Moving on to the bronzer. This was something I didn't use too heavily in this video because I really wanted to show off the contour palette as well, and if you really wanted to, you could use this bronzer palette in a contouring fashion also. And this just comes in the one shade. 2 of them are matte, the ones that are right here, and then you've got one that's got quite a bit of shimmer in it, a goldeny shimmer, and then right down here is a satin finish. I feel like if each of these shades were super duper pigmented, there might be enough difference between them to constitute having 4 different shades of bronzer in a palette, but I don't think they're quite intense enough. And as you see the swatches, it's like, wow, they don't really really stand out too much one from the next. For the purposes of just warming up my skin a little bit in this video, I used the satiny finish one and just dusted that around. I did use a mix of the matte shades and kind of took those down my neck and décolleté area. To the touch, you wouldn't think there's any real quality issues with them. It's just that there's not quite enough of a color punch for me to make all of these shades worthwhile. They definitely can add a little bronzy touch to my skin tone, which would be, I'd say, light to medium, but if you were tan or richer skin tone, these really wouldn't show up for you. So along with the foundation palette, here's another thing that I really wasn't too thrilled with, wouldn't repurchase. But the tide starts to turn with the contour palette. Really, really happy with this one. Here, I think you've got 4 distinct products that are all worth having in the palette, and I think they all perform really well, and they're basically dupes for a product that I really, really love for contouring, my Emily Award-winning contour product, my Smashbox palette here. The one thing about this, as you might have seen if you watched my Get Ready With Me video, one of these, which I haven't gone ahead and glued it back in yet, just popped right out, and it wasn't the whole pan, you know, from the back popping out, but it just like came unglued, so I need to glue that back in. But this one that I'm going to go ahead and set aside is just a light cream shade with a little bit of shimmer, and then the remaining 3 are all matte. This one's kind of a yellowish toned beige powder, your cool tone contour, and then more of a bronzy type contour. Those 3 shades, I tell you, I've swatched them right side by side with my Smashbox palette. So impressed with the quality of them. So $6, yeah, I'll take that. A couple things to be aware of. When you tap your brush into this light shade, for whatever reason, this one kicks up way more powder than anything else. I didn't notice that dustiness with the other ones. Be aware, you only need to barely tap your brush into that. And also, this shimmery shade is not like crazy glowy shimmery. It's got a little more glow compared to the other ones, just a little bit though. Like, I've got a little bit of this on my cheeks. I wore a matte blush today, so this could kind of stand out. You might be seeing just the tiniest bit of glow out of this. It's very subtle. So I almost wish that because all this stuff was matte, I wish they would have put in a highlight that had a little more punch to it. Still not complaining. Really like the results from this, so I'll show you how I used it. I used my e.l.f. angled studio brush with the cool tone contour, went right there in the hollows of the cheeks. Loved the way it really chiseled them out. Use that up around my hairline as well. You can easily go under the jaw with that shade. That would be a nice shade for contouring the nose as well. And then also the bronzy one. I like taking this on the cheeks just above where I used that deepest contour, and also warming up the whole forehead area. I think this works great for that. I'm able to use this palette really in the same way I use the Smashbox one. And then that light shade can be nice if you wanted to use that as an under eye setting powder. Again, use a very light hand because it can pick up a lot of product. Your brush will. This lightest shade really might be the one that people with fair skin find the most contrast with their skin tone, because it does give off quite a bit of color, just not a ton of shimmer. Now for these eye palettes, I want to start off with the Mad for Matte palette. These are all 10 color palettes, this one being 100% matte. As you can see, it's got a great range of neutrals here, going from, you know, a couple of light highlight shades, some nice midtones with a brown, kind of a rusty, warm brown shade, into some cooler browns, a deep eggplant type color, and then a gray and a near black charcoal type shade. I was really impressed with the feel of these. They kind of remind me in texture of the e.l.f. Mineral Shadow Singles, which I've really been a fan of over the years. It kind of seems to me like they've placed that formula in a 10 color palette, so I'm happy with that. I think these are great basics. These palettes are $10 a piece, whereas the other ones were $6, the face ones. These are 10, so I think that's something to think about. That's a rather high price tag for e.l.f., but I do find this matte palette to be worth it. I've used it in quite a few different ways. This is a nice lineup of basics that can be used alongside all sorts of different shimmery looks. I actually did use a couple shades in this look today, and I'll get to that in the demo. This was my favorite out of all of these e.l.f. eyeshadow palettes that I tried, and something that kind of caught my eye when I first glanced at this, it made me think of the matte row of the Lorac Pro 1 palette. So I did go ahead and swatch some of those underneath, not really so you could identify dupes or anything, but just to sort of see the overall quality comparison, the color scheme comparison. If you already have the Lorac Pro 1, you've already got a really nice selection of matte neutrals there. So I wouldn't say you need to race out and get this one. But if your question is, could you do the same matte look with this as you could do with the matte part of that palette, I think you absolutely could. I really think I could do one eye with this, one eye with the other one, and you wouldn't know the difference. Potential video idea? I think so. I've already got some things cooking on that front. An area where you might need to work a little harder with this palette than Lorac, let's say, would be the lighter shades. There's a little bit easier color payoff with Lorac than this, but still, I feel like these work just fine, and I'm very happy with that. Let's move on to the Party Ready palette. That's the other one I have on my eyes today. This one, gosh, it looks super fun at a glance. You've got bronzy colors and neutrals, then several shades that are really like berry type grape, blueberry, pink shades, and then several really dark and smoky ones. Unfortunately, I was a little underwhelmed by this palette. The colors in here that you really expect to pop, I just don't think did quite enough for me. I am wearing that true blue on my lids. I've got the pink actually on my lower lash line. You'll see that in action also, and it just, you know, it didn't quite give me enough. Something I like that e.l.f. did here is that they did put in a variety of different textures. So like this peachy shade right here is matte. You've got a couple of mattes right here in this palette, some metallic finishes, some that have a little bit of sparkle. So I love that they went that extra step to actually give some variety in the finishes. But like I was hoping for so much more out of this pink shade, and I mean you can see for yourself in the swatches, it's just not quite enough intensity. The other palettes that are available, Need It Nude. This is one that if you want to see a full demo using this, I used this in my last Get Ready With Me video. But I mean, it's a pretty layout of colors, a very kind of sunset type look here with the bronzy shades, some very yellowish golden colors, some chocolatey browns, a nice mix of matte and shimmer here because you've got your light matte highlight shade, kind of a pinky toned matte, and then a couple of nice dark brown mattes. I actually expected a little more pigmentation in some of these metallics, and just the overall palette to look at it. If you already own a lot of neutral eyeshadow palettes, you're glancing at this thinking, yeah, I already got a lot of that. So I see this as something, yeah, I can get a pretty look out of it, but 10 bucks for this, I'm not thinking so. And the Everyday Smoky palette, that's what this one's called. I've got a lot of the same opinions on this one as I do on the last one. Not to sound like a broken record, but as with the other palettes, they did do a good job of giving you a great balance of dark, medium, and light, and a lot of different finishes. I mean, every one of these palettes contains mattes. Of course, the 100% matte one does, but all the rest do too, and I appreciate that. But like this shade, just really, really flaky all over the place. I could absolutely do a good smoky eye with this, but it's kind of like, I feel like these palettes need to bring a little bit something different. You know, maybe just a few different shades thrown in instead of just the whole monochromatic color scheme. So in competition with everything else on the market, you look at one of these and think, oh, I need that because it's got, you know, that little different shade, maybe a twist of burgundy or a twist of like a forest green type shade. You know, something that kind of makes you take a second look at it. That's just my opinion. For this eye look, I went between two different palettes. I used the Party Ready and the Mad for Matte palette, and I did prime my lids. I would advise priming your eyelids with any eyeshadow you use, and the same goes for these e.l.f. shadows. So I used from the Party Ready palette that royal blue color. I patted that all over the lids. Didn't give me quite the color payoff I was hoping for. I was wanting just a little more intensity, and then I used the lightest shade in that palette to just go around the inner corner and brighten that up. And I used the navy blue, which has some shimmer in this palette on the outer corner, and I noticed that didn't really pack on much color. I had to build that up quite a bit. In my crease, I used the matte palette, and I went to the sort of dark, dusty eggplant color, and then I blended just above that with the kind of pinky toned beige color. And right under the brow, I used the light cream shade as my highlight. On the lower lash line, I went back to the Party Ready palette, and I used the pink with a smudge brush down along the lower lash line. And I finished the look with black liquid liner on the upper lash line and black liner on the lower inner rim, smudging it downward somewhat to kind of blend in with that pink. So again, the overall thought on these eyeshadow palettes is that e.l.f.'s charging $10 for each of these, so I think they really needed to step up their game. I can absolutely turn out something that I think I'm gonna like, but when I look at these from the perspective of all the other shadows I have in my collection, I'm not seeing these as worth the $10, with the exception of the matte palette, which I think was really well done. It's a nice selection of basics, and I think they really did a great job with that matte texture. texture. The other ones, as you saw in a lot of the swatches, just a little bit light in pigmentation, especially just the lighter shades in these palettes. I thought that was especially where the pigmentation was lacking. I do think if it's been a while since you've tried e.l.f. stuff and then you swatch these with your finger, you know, there is a nice kind of smooth, buttery creaminess to a lot of these shadows that is pretty impressive, I think. For half this price tag, I mean, go out and find Wet n Wild's Comfort Zone palettes and other Color Icon palettes. Those are great from the drugstore and they're a huge bargain. So for me, my two top picks out of everything I've mentioned would be the matte shadow palette, but the grand prize winner, the contour palette. Really happy with this and just love how similar that was to my Smashbox one. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was an informative video. If it was, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and I'll see you guys later. Bye.